magnificent new legend.
G'day, legends. Rightio, let's talk about July 1985. Punters were strolling in to the flicks, expecting to see an absolute banger of a sword and sorcery epic. And as 3 years earlier, Conan the Barbarian rocked up and smashed pop culture directly in the face like a heavy-duty broadsword, it proved to all those Hollywood snobs that sword and sorcery wasn't just some sort of cheap bottom shelf drive-in garbage, but proper high-end art cinema. Then came Conan the Destroyer in 1984, which watered down the blood and guts a bit so the kids could watch it, but it still had the absolute unit himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger, flexing those massive biceps. So when the posters for Red Sonja popped up at the local cinema, the marketing blokes weren't even trying to hide it. Right above this stunning Sheila with the fiery mane of red hair stood Arnie, clad in leather, holding a massive sword, looking 100% like Conan in every way except for the name tag. Big shot Italian producer Dino De Laurentiis basically promised, yeah, nah mate, don't worry about it. It's another epic banger coming out of the Hyborian Age. But instead, punters sat down and were hit with a bizarre, slow-paced theatrical mess that really tanked at the box office. So hard, it basically put the handbrake on 1980s fantasy movies altogether. I mean, Red Sonja didn't launch a massive female-led action franchise like they kind of thought it would. Nah. It turned into an absolute legendary story of producer hubris, dodgy contracts, and total creative confusion. But here's the kicker, nearly 40 years down the track, there's still some ridiculous charm to this glittery, over-the-top shocker of a film.
Yeah, has its charm.
Now look, to figure out how this bloody thing got made, you gotta look back at the comic books. Now, created by Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith for Marvel's Conan comics back in 1973, Sonja was loosely based off a short story by Robert E. Howard, who wrote the original novels. With her flaming red hair and a legendary metal bikini, she became a fan favorite bloody fast. She got her own comic book runs, slinging that sword around and showing everyone that women could chop off limbs just as well as the blokes could. And by the early 80s, old Dino, he had grabbed the film rights fresh off making an absolute mint off the first Conan movie. Dino saw dollar signs all over this bad boy, and he was trying to build a massive cinematic universe decades before Marvel had even thought of the term.
We thought of it first. Oh, yeah.
But fair dinkum, the development of this was an absolute dog's breakfast, that's for sure. The script kept bouncing around until Dino handed the keys off to Richard Fleischer. Now, Fleischer was an reliable, old-school legend who'd made some absolute bangers like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and The Fantastic Voyage. Plus, he'd just come off hot off the heels of actually doing Conan the Destroyer. I mean, the bloke was a total professional, but he wasn't some sort of dreamy visionary. He just turned up, did his job like a fair dinkum tradesman, and ended up making a movie that felt less like a mythical legend and more like maybe an expensive school play, maybe. Whew. Now, casting the lead actress was an absolute mission. Good old Dino, he spent nearly a year looking everywhere for a Sheila who was tall, ripped, and looked dangerous enough to play the vengeful warrior. And after binning what seemed like hundreds of audition tapes, he was flipping through this magazine, a fashion magazine no less, and he sees a photo of this 6'1" Danish model named Brigitte Nielsen and goes, yep, that's her, mate. Nielsen had essentially zero acting experience, but she had a huge presence. So they flew her straight out to Rome, gave her a quick screen test, and pretty much handed her the job on the spot. Now, look, to make sure the old money men and those cinema owners didn't get in a panic, Dino needed a big name to sell the tickets. So, what did he do? He called up his old mate Arnie and said, Arnie, you still owe me a movie, mate. And he's like, rightio, because, you know, the contract says so. So, look, he agreed to do a little cameo in this, playing a bloke named Lord Kalidor. Why Kalidor? Well, because of some legal rights issues with Conan. So look, he looks like Conan, he talks like Conan, he chops people up like Conan, but the film's looking you dead in the eye and going, nah mate, totally different guy. I don't know what you're talking about at all. Classic legal loophole right there.
See what I did there?
I see what you did there.
They also scored Sandal Bergman, who played Valeria in the first Conan movie. Look, she turned down playing Red Sonja because she didn't want to be typecast. So instead, she played the evil Queen Gedrin. And honest to God, look, she goes full villain mode in this movie, just chewing up the scenery like a starving dog and completely stealing every scene she's in. Man, she just swings for the fences in this movie. So look, they shot this thing down at Dino's studio near Rome and out in the dusty, rocky old hills of Abruzzo, Italy. Now, the cinematographer Giuseppe Rotundo brought a super weird, dreamy, theatrical look to the whole thing. I mean, forget the muddy, grim realism of that first Conan movie. This thing was packed with some bright primary colours, massive clouds of studio fog, and some painted backdrops that made it look like it was a live-action comic book on acid. It was an absolute proper struggle for Nielsen on set. She had to learn how to swing a sword, ride a horse. Hell, she was learning how to speak English all at the same time. Arnie became like a big brother on set and helped the young model cope with this brutal physical grind of shooting a movie like this. Then came the 3rd of July 1985 when the film launched in the cinemas and it got utterly smashed. The summer of 85 was stacked with some heavyweights like Back to the Future, Rambo 2 and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. The film critics went absolutely wild on it. They ripped into the paper-thin plot, the wooden acting and the budget special effects, especially that laughable rubbery mechanical sea monster. Oh my God, that looks like a carnival ride gone wrong. Punters, look, they completely ignored it too. I mean, it cost about 18 million schmackos to make and they only pulled about 6.9 million back home. It was a total box office disaster. And they say it pretty much killed the sword and sorcery genre right there in its tracks.
They? Who's they?
Over the years, the behind-the-scenes lore has become the usual stuff of legend. And Arnie, he joked about for decades that Red Sonja was probably the absolute worst movie he ever did. Well, I could debate that. There's a famous running joke that whenever his kids acted up, he'd threaten to lock them in a room and make them watch Red Sonja 10 times in a row. Absolutely brutal parenting there. They chopped a stack of scenes out in the final edit, which included some great extra background stuff on Queen Gedrin's dark magic and past, and some more training bits of Sonja, which might have actually made her transformation into this absolute weapon of a swordsman make a bit more sense to the audience at the end of the day. Now look, like heaps of those great 80s box office misfires, Red Sonja, it found its true home at the good old home local video rental shops. And look, on VHS, it sat there on the shelves next to other fantasy flicks. And it just turned it into this ultimate cult classic amongst fantasy fans. Fast forward a couple of decades and we got the DVD by Universal and Studio Canal, which was the first release in 2004 in usual various bare bone standard definition editions. Only a few years later though, we got the first Blu-ray release on the 28th of June 2010 by Optimum Home Entertainment in the UK, followed by a remastered Blu-ray edition on the 31st of August 2022 from Studio Canal in the States, which was almost the same time when they released the first 4K HD release in selected international regions. And only just recently we got a special edition in the US, a 4K HD release from Arrow Video on the 24th of March 2026, where they released this stunning, absolute stunning collector's set with poster and all the bits and pieces for some of you serious collectors out there.
Oh, I am serious.
Wow. Oh my God. I can't say the last time I watched this movie. I can't remember how long it's been. But yeah, look, when I was a teenager, I must have seen this movie and the other two Conan movies. Oh Christ, a dozen times over at least back in the day. Mad fantasy fan back then. And I gotta say, I really did enjoy watching this movie again. It's a great 80s fun sword and sorcery movie that really is a product of its time. Now, look, with that being said, after not watching it for so long, look, watching it now through adult eyes, there is one thing I noticed, one big thing I noticed actually, that I never really took notice to probably back in my teenage years, and that is Brigitte Nielsen is so freaking bad in this movie. Now, look, her action scenes and her presence were really good. She really played the character great, but her acting and probably more so her delivering of her lines were so wooden and stiff, it's hard not to notice straight away. It doesn't take, like, it didn't take me out of the movie, but it's hard not to cringe sometimes when she's trying to deliver a monologue. And, oh God, it sounds rough. And it's not hard to see that English was her second language. But look, overall, I really did enjoy rewatching this movie again, and I would probably, look, honestly give it a 7 out of 10. Like, it's not terrible. And look, of course it was great because you got to see Arnie in action again, swinging a sword around, even if he wasn't Conan.
We don't talk about that.
Now, look, at the end of the day, good old Red Sonja, it occupies a pretty unique spot in movie history, that's for sure. It was a massive box office flop, there's no two ways about that, and they reckon it killed off 80s fantasy flicks, but it's also a rare time that a major studio would actually back a female-led fantasy action movie. I mean, it really paved the way for the legends like Xena Warrior Princess later down the track. And for Brigitte Nielsen, well, that was a launch pad that got her straight into Hollywood, scoring her some massive gigs in Rocky IV and Beverly Hills Cop 2. Look, nobody really hates Red Sonja these days. We kind of look back on it with a big goofy old smile. It's a shiny, utterly ridiculous piece of 80s cheese from a time when studios were willing to build massive fake sets and let blokes and Sheilas swing real swords under some bright studio lights. It's definitely not a masterpiece, that's for sure, but fair dinkum, it's a bloody entertaining ride nonetheless. In a world now packed with some pretty boring fake-ass looking green screen movies, there's a real charm to this film made with painted backdrops, real stunt performers, and 100% genuine heart. It didn't conquer the box office back in '85, but as a shiny, hilarious time capsule of 80s fantasy cinema, good old Red Sonja still gives it a red hot go. Next week on the show, we are going to look at Red Sonja, the movie from 2025 on Blu-ray. Can't wait to see what they do with the reboot. Thanks for watching.